Welcome back to Love of One Healing and Transformation. In episode 14, I sit down with Wayne Marto, a planetary gong facilitator and retreat guide, to explore the profound healing available through sound. We unpack the science of vibration, the power of puja, and how gongs helped both of us breathe again on every level. Be sure to stay until the end of this episode, where you'll experience a special 12-minute gong meditation recorded live by Wayne. I've even enhanced the volume for an immersive sound experience so you can receive the full vibrational gift wherever you are. Today, I am honored and excited to talk about gong sounds and a gong puja with you, with Wayne Marto. Wayne, welcome to Love of One.
Angela, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. I
Thank
want to
you.
just dive into these,
Yes.
talking about gongs and your path to transformation and how you got into gongs of all things. There's a million different instruments that one could choose on their path, and gongs resonate with me on a very deep level. And I wonder if that's the same with everybody or a vast majority of people. So if you could just dive in, let us know a little bit about Wayne and, your
Absolutely.
path.
You
Yeah,
betcha. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
for sure.
And so a lot, even just with that first question, there's a lot there to unpack, right?
Hmm.
So first of all, it's our birthright as human beings to be bathed in sound and frequency based on how we're made as human beings, this coagulated mass of matter that's vibration and energy. We strive for vibrational balance and to vibrate at an optimal level. So anytime we're exposed to beneficial sounds, frequencies, bowls, bells, whistles, gongs, something wonderful happens really naturally with no effort on our part. Essentially, we sonically entrain the frequencies that are good for us. So when we hear something that's good, a frequency that aligns with an organ, cell, bones, muscles, tissue, we latch onto it. It just sonic entrainment simply means rhythmic vibrations that are similar resonate together. So essentially, we go out and latch on to frequencies that are good for us. And essentially, we're brought back to this peak vibrational state over a period of time through this entrainment process. So exposing ourselves to sound and frequency, it's our birthright. It's a very natural thing for us to do. The gongs do happen to be a unique flavor, if you will, within sonic therapy.
Mhm.
There's certain attributes to the gongs that are very unique. So maybe I'll leave it right there for now on the gongs, and then I'll start with how I got involved, and then
Yeah,
it'll all come
full
together
circle.
and we'll talk more about the gongs. Yeah. So for me personally, I stumbled upon the gongs really. It's kind of a long story that I'll make short, but basically right at about 45 years old, I had working in IT sales. I had a career in IT sales for 25 years as a traveling sales guy. And I came home from kind of a typical business trip, a couple nights in Las Vegas, taking the partners out, having a good time doing my thing. And I had gotten home, and Saturday morning, there was an impromptu photo that went around. I was coaching my son's basketball team, and it was the last game of the year. We took an impromptu picture, and it went around that night. And I received it that evening, and I was looking at myself in the picture and then looking at myself in the mirror. And I said, man, this good life that I've managed to track down after all these years of IT sales, I'm living the good life. I have the house and the cars, and I had a boat and happily married with kids and family and all that. But I could see that it was really taking a toll on me, just the way that I looked, bloated, overweight. I hadn't
Mm.
exercised in a long this time. So at the time I was a practicing Catholic, and Lent was right around the corner. And so I decided to give up anything that didn't empower me.
Mm.
And it was a big list, but it included alcohol, and I was casually smoking marijuana and just having fun in life and really kind of not thinking about the heavy stuff. And so after the 40 days of Lent, I really emerged from that time period kind of with a clear head and started asking myself the big questions in life: why I'm here, what's the meaning of it all. And so what actually started off with just a move of really vanity, of physically wanting to look better, opened the doors to this deep spiritual dive that I ended up not drinking for 5.5 years as I really peeled the onion and started exploring different religions. I was raised Catholic. And so I always felt like that was the only way, the only real true religion. And so I started exploring other ones and the history of Catholicism as well, which really made me take a step back and look at other religions. And so I just kind of became open to spirituality and other ways to kind of getting to the top of the mountain, as it were.
Mhm.
And so about a year into that process, I had started meditating and doing yoga for the first time. And I read in one of the books that a gong is a meditative tool, to help you be put into a deep meditative state. And so I got a CD, listened to it up in my yoga room in my home after my breath work and my yoga. And I just had this incredible experience with the sound, a deep emotional release. And the sound really kind of gripped me and moved me in a way that is beyond words.
Mhm.
I did go right out and buy a big Pluto gong. That's kind of the way I roll. I went big,
That's pretty
but
big.
I didn't, it's pretty big. And I didn't know, I went into a shop in Seattle and I said, I'm going to buy a gong from you, but I don't know which one. Just give me a little while with the mallets and some quiet time. And I played about 20 of them. And through process of elimination, I ended up choosing Pluto. I didn't know it was a planet gong at the time,
Mm.
nor did I realize how prevalent Pluto was in my natal chart. That would come later.
Yeah.
But so I do come from a family of musicians. So I'm a drummer and a bass player. So stepping into the role as playing the gong was a really easy thing.
Mm.
But I was really moved less so by the listening pleasure that you can create with it, but the transformation that's available in the instrument. And so then I just went out and started playing as soon as I got certified through a gong master in Austin, Texas, and then learned some basic techniques and then really started playing. This was in 2012, I think, when I started playing for the first time. So it was really a process of self-discovery in all of it. It's really been a tool for my own personal development and awakening, awareness, and spirituality. And so as that has grown, I've been able to realize that one of the real reasons that sound has such an impact, it definitely, there's the physiological sonic entrainment, there's the ability for the sounds to put us into a deep meditative state. But really what I've found is the intention of the player and then the openness of the recipient of the sound. Those are
Mm.
two of the keys. And so I've been able to really, really, yes, I've played over 1,000 gong meditations to date,
Mhm.
and I'm playing all of the time. And so there is a craft and a technique and an art that we have through this creative expression of the sound.
Sure.
But the secret sauce is the intention of the player while you're playing, why you're playing the gongs. What is the intention of that moment? And as my spirituality has deepened, I've been able to really harness that energy and bring it into the playing and then express that in a way to the group so that they're understanding what they're receiving and that they're open to it and inviting the sound in. There's no healing without permission. And so when the recipient is open and allowing the sound to enter, when the player's tuned and aligned and bringing in this divine creative energy to be imbued with the sound, it can be a really, really powerful experience.
No, I agree 100%. I think that intention in any crafted modality is the most important. And I'm a huge believer that there is no healing without permission. Like everything
Mm,
should have permission from both sides for that true energy exchange to occur, right?
for
So,
sure. We're sovereign beings and
of course.
there's no putting something upon you that you haven't wished for or allowed yourself to happen.
Exactly, exactly. With the gongs themselves, now you play mostly planetary gongs, not all, but mostly. What do you think is the difference between just regular gongs, like tuned to, let's say, the flower of life versus, planetary gongs?
Well, so they're all going to be wonderful in their own way.
Mhm.
In fact, there's a school in England, the Sound Healing Institute, that regularly has students come through and they take classes on sound healing and primarily gongs, and then they graduate and they go out and play. And they use almost exclusively symphonic
Oh,
gongs.
interesting.
So, yeah, so basically in a quick nutshell, the gongs are thousands of years old, originating really in Asia. But in the late 1800s, the early 1800s, they started being made in the European style
Mhm.
by big, larger German firms. And kind of the biggest is a company called Paisti.
Yeah.
And they use a certain alloy called nickel silver that really holds the resonance, probably more so than any other metal. And in the early 1900s, they were making a lot of symphonic gongs for symphonies. And even in the 1970s, all of the rock bands, pretty much all of the rock bands had a big gong behind the drum kit
Mhm.
that they would whack. And those
Mhm.
were symphonic gongs because they were tuned to a range of sound.
Mhm.
It wasn't a specific musical note. It was usually a range, and the musical note hopped around a little bit. But in 1983, Hans Cousteau, who is a Swiss scientist, published papers in a book called The Cosmic Octave.
Mhm.
And the cosmic octave was a way mathematically to determine the sound that planets made based on their size, the length of their orbit, the speed of their rotation. So mathematically, they determined if it had an atmosphere, this is what it would sound like if you were standing on the moon, for example. And so then they went to the German gong makers and said, hey, we know the frequency of the moon and the sun and earth. And so they began hand hammering those frequencies into the gongs and then calling them tuned planet gongs.
Mhm.
So in the early 1980s, the planet gongs were born.
Mhm.
So purely from a sonic entrainment perspective, there's different frequencies for bowls, chimes, bells, whistles, gongs. And so you're flooding the human being with all these frequencies, and then the human body is in training, right? So that
Yeah.
is similar, regardless of whether it's a symphonic gong, whether it's a chow gong made in China, or whether it's a tuned planet gong. That entrainment's going to happen as long as the frequencies align. But what I found, again, stumbling upon Pluto being my first gong, and then realizing that I had this planet gong, I started just building it out from a planetary perspective. And so I did try symphonic gongs, and I've
Mhm.
tried other brands, and I do have Asian chows in my lineup, but primarily they're the Paisti German-made planetary tune gongs that has really captivated me. So
Mhm.
part of it is that there's an energy to the planets.
Mhm.
There's an energy when you play Pluto, there's an essence there
Sure
that
is.
is really unique to Pluto and to the feel, the energy, the frequency of that planet. And so I tried to veer away. In fact, my gong coach, when I was first starting out, I had bought Pluto. It was the only gong I had. And then suddenly he came into my life, as
Mhm.
these things happen.
Yes, they do.
And he said, wow, that's the real transformer. You really started off with a heavy gong. You may want to try something that's a little to combination with that would be something lighter and brighter and a little more uplifting. So he recommended the Cyanotic Moon Gong,
Mhm.
which was my second gong. And so now I began to have this planetary kind of framework. And he did say, generally speaking, a symphonic gong is a little easier to play because it
Mhm.
doesn't have a tuned note. It has a range. And so it's a little easier to kind of coax the sound out of it. And he said he recommended that his students start on those. And so my third gong was a symphonic,
Didn't
the only
resonate.
gong I've never liked.
Yeah.
Only gong I didn't like. Honestly, I love all gongs,
Yeah.
but that one I had to send back, and I ended up getting another planet gong instead. So now I have 17 gongs altogether,
Wow.
and they're all tuned planet gongs.
I think that was your
And so
purpose.
I think that was my purpose. And so as I've kind of learned more
Mm.
about myself under this whole awakening process and this unfolding into self,
Yeah.
definitely that has been this has become what started off as like a hobby that was, wow, very, very interesting, became a passion. And then my passion became my purpose. And
Yeah.
then I had no choice but to step into the role completely.
What a
So I've
beautiful
been
story.
playing,
Mhm.
yeah, I've been playing the gongs live for 10 years now. And I quit my IT sales job after 23 years
Mm.
and have been doing the gongs now as my only source of income for the last 3 years.
That's amazing. Well, I met you through one of your gong baths because you travel up and down the West Coast, I
I
know,
do.
and you stop along the way to give these 62-minute, is that right? 62-minute?
That's right, 62, not 63
No,
or
no,
61.
just 62-minute sound baths with planetary gongs, and I like that you also bring on those trips the attunement to what's happening with our planet alignment at that time. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like how do you
Absolutely.
find like that? Does that just make it resonate more? It deepens the frequency more in our bodies because we're all going through that same shift?
Right. Well, that was something that kind of evolved from this collection of the gongs and
Mm-hmm.
being more in tune. As I said at the beginning, I picked Pluto, didn't know it was so impactful in my chart. And my one of my instructors, the guy from Austin, he's a Vedic astrologer. And so I've begun to learn more about my own personal chart and what it means. And one of the things that I've learned is that we all have governing planets
Mhm.
based on our sun sign, which is kind of neat to see that certain planets have different meanings for us based
For
on
sure.
our zodiac sign. And so what I try to do is I'll try to take a look at the night sky, and I'm not overly invested in astrology per se, but I like
Mhm.
to then at least bring in the ones that are appropriate. So right
Mhm.
now, for example, tomorrow I leave on what I call the Mars tour. And the Mars tour aligns with Aries. Aries is the zodiac period that we're in now. And so Aries is governed by Mars. And so Mars is part of the tour. And then I have other gongs that I'm bringing that align well with Mars. Mars is the masculine energy. It's also the navel center
Mhm.
gong. That's
The
one thing I
fire.
hadn't mentioned, but it
Mhm.
is the fire. It is the fire. It's action, willpower, determination. It's moving us into action.
Mhm.
And so that's a very powerful, brooding gong. So I also bring Venus. Venus is the feminine energy, and that's very balancing from a yin yang perspective with Mars.
Mhm.
Also, the moon gong, because it's lighter and brighter. And then it kind of is, it's the element of water.
Mhm.
And so that kind of balances a little bit of the Mars energy. So I'm picking usually things that are happening in the night sky. It may be a new moon, it may be a full moon, maybe there's a prominent planet that evening or that in that time period that I'll try to weave that in. But I don't spend too much time talking about that stuff.
Mhm.
That's just an add-on.
Mhm.
We could do the gong. Sometimes I'll do the whole gong meditation and really not mention anything about the planets at all.
Mhm.
Because really, one of the things I found through doing the gong meditations and really the school of hard knocks, if you will, is that we don't need to know much.
Mhm.
The recipient doesn't need to know much at all
Mhm.
to still have a wonderful experience with the sound. So I try to keep the talking to a minimum. And so then when you start bringing in things about the planets and this and that, that's time up front when really the recipient wants to get to the sound.
Yeah.
So afterwards is where I kind of go into more detail for people who are interested. But to answer your question, yes, there is an opportunity to align the gongs with what's happening in the night sky. And then it's really interesting for all of us. Even I can remember when I was younger and I'd go out to breakfast with my friends, we all passed around that little horoscope section of the newspaper. We
Yeah.
all wanted to see what our week
Yeah.
looked like or our
Yeah.
day looked like. And so when we come to a
Okay.
gong meditation and then you learn, oh, I'm, Gemini, and there's a specific, planetary gong
Yeah.
that is your governing planet.
Yeah.
It's kind of meaningful for people.
No, I agree. Yeah, the Jupiter is and Mercury are very prominent in my 12th house of
Mm.
Taurus. And yeah, they every time. And so we'll get into it. You also started these retreats, and I recently attended one. As soon as I put my mat down, I was kind of late getting down there for the reason. And I noticed at the very foot of my space was the Jupiter gong.
Oh, encroaching upon your space
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, immediately I
Yes.
was like, "Okay, this is." And then also knowing, because I love astrology as well, that retreat, and I don't know if it was purposeful, but for your scheduling, but it was right at the end of the eclipse weekend.
Yes, it was. That wasn't on purpose. That was a wonderful, I
Guys.
probably
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was a wonderful surprise. I planned the retreat dates out well in advance because of the retreat centers. And so we're booking well in advance. So I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a nice turn of events, if you will.
Yes.
So the weekend retreats have evolved from the years of playing up and down from Northern California to in Washington and Oregon, and really just playing, like I say, over 1,000 different events out. And so
Yeah.
my model is mobile.
Hmm.
So I don't have a home yoga studio that I play out all the time. I do privates for individuals and couples, and I give lessons here in my home sound sanctuary that I have, but that's really small for individuals and couples.
I see.
So my model's mobile. So I'm constantly on the go, taking the gongs around. And I found that that allows me to touch a lot more people and a lot more communities than I would if I had really focused on trying to build my own space up here in Seattle.
For sure.
And so, yeah, so I'm mobile. So once it got to the point of having enough fans, if you will,
Hmm.
then I thought, well, the gong meditation is generally a 90-minute experience. And that includes a very brief introduction of the gongs, the 62 minutes of sound, not 61 or 63,
62.
but 62 minutes of sound. Based on the reason I say that is that that's what the rishis had said was the optimal amount of time to meditate,
Mm,
and that the gray matter in your brain can actually change at that point in time.
that's interesting.
And they, of course, were talking about some sort of mindfulness meditation, not gong
Competition.
meditation, but I've incorporated that into my, since it's sound
Right.
meditation. So I play for 62 minutes, and then there's a little time on the backside to come out of the experience, to integrate, and to have a little bit of community. But it's still relatively short. And so what I learned over the years was that the sound clears away emotional blockages that we have. We clear this, a whole nother deeper conversation, but we clear, it's a vibrational tune up, but it's an emotional cleansing. And so we can clear space. We emerge from that 62 minutes of sound feeling like, wow, my problems are the same, but I'm looking at them differently now. And I feel like I've emptied some of the junk that I was carrying around. And then the question is, what are we going to do now? What are we going to fill it with? And so generally speaking, with a 62-minute, or rather the 90-minute gong meditation, there's really no time to talk about now what.
Yeah.
And so that's where the retreats were born, so that we can really focus on lots of gong and over the weekend, but also the mental causation and the ability to co-create and
Hmm.
to now say we have space that we've made. What are we going to fill it with? And then the practice of manifesting what we want now in this new fertile ground that we've created.
No, that's beautiful. So you call them pujas, right?
I do the all night puja,
Yes.
right?
For people that are probably hearing this for the first time, because I know I had not heard it for ever until one of your sound baths, and you mentioned you have these retreats coming. Puja is an all-night sound bath covered in gongs. So it started around 8 or 9 p.m. and went until 5 a.m. I have to admit that the night before I arrived to your retreat, my daughter and I went to the symphony, and it was sounds of the planets. So
Wow.
and
How about that?
we were right up front. So I think that for me, that may have played a little bit into my experience for the rest of the
I'm
weekend,
sure.
because you play planetary gongs. I listened to the planetary symphony, then went to gongs during the eclipse. Like, and
It's like, come on.
it was a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
So for me on Friday when I arrived and we had the first 90-minute gong session, first we had breath work and yoga, which was great. And then settled in, and you were playing the gongs while she was going through that, which was also awesome to experience for the first time. And then during the gong meditation, I just like in it. I was so deep in it. But afterwards, I went to my room and I was still in it for like 3 hours solid. And the emotional release, because you had talked about that already, was so vast. I think I bawled my eyes out for like 3 hours. I don't know if anyone heard me in the other rooms, but
I didn't.
that's good. um, and it was so, so powerful. And then the whole weekend just went more over since that. But it was so impactful. And the only thing I can describe the entire weekend specifically to sleeping through gong vibrations and frequencies for that amount of time, I can relate it to having plant medicine ceremonies, but without any plant medicine. So,
Right.
yeah, so
No
it's
medicine needed.
no medicine needed. It was very impactful, if not even more on certain levels. And I found that to be really intriguing. And that's why I wanted you on this podcast to talk about it, because it's a different level of modality that people probably don't really think can get to that level, right?
Well, sound is medicine,
Hmm.
right? So sound is medicine. The ancients have known that for a long time. In fact, I think it was Tesla who said, if you want to look to the future of healing, it's sound or
Yes.
something crudely paraphrased, but
Yes.
that's the idea.
Yeah.
And so your experience, so each one of us has this really unique experience with the sound.
Hmm.
Often it's not the same twice.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that goes into it, right? You had that boom, you had this symphonic
Hmm.
planetary experience just before you were also tuned into what was happening in the night sky. And so that was brought in. But then also there's this natural emotional release that the sound coaxes out of us. And
Hmm.
so it's so a couple things there. The regarding the weekend,
Hmm.
the part of the weekend is the fact that we know that in order to really get the most from the sound,
Hmm.
it's important that the body's placated in some way. If
Hmm.
we're storing a lot of tension and stress physically in the body, it's hard to relax and let go. And so we use the asanas, the body poses to placate the body and start opening the body, opening that first kosha, the first level of being. Then the second level of being, this energetic level, is governed by your breath. And so we're working in a little bit of breath work practice throughout the weekend also to help move some of the energy. And that
Hmm.
allows us to kind of move into that third level of being, the emotional body, that's governed by sacred sound.
Hmm.
And then the sound can really go there and have its biggest impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So how often do you have these retreats?
So I started doing the retreats in 2024. Sorry, I
Hmm.
did two of them in 2024, and now I'm doing four of them in 2025.
Hmm.
And so that you experienced the first one in 2025. I
Hmm.
have my next one is at the end of this month, end of April in Washington.
Hmm.
And that's full also. So far, all of them have been full and they've been really, really impactful and great learning experience for me and for my co-hosts on how to keep refining it and getting it better. And then I'll have two again in the fall of this year in Oregon and Washington. We'll add one in California. So it's kind of growing and evolving into its own beast, if you will.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that there were people in attendance at this one that were from across the United States and different states to come in and endure this experience that
Then remarkable.
I think it's kind of rare in our side of the world, at least. I haven't really heard of them very often having like
So
that
the
sound
puja,
all night long. Yeah.
right. So the puja part,
Hmm.
excuse me, I didn't really answer that. But the puja is a Sanskrit word that basically is celebration of self, the
Hmm.
puja. And so the Gong Puja is the all-night celebration. So you do get gonged from about 8:30 till 5. And we do a little nidra in there to settle you in. And
Yep.
part of the thing is building all towards this manifesting of what you want to have in your life. And that's kind of the pinnacle of
Yeah.
the experience. But the puja is a way for us to say, well, we're acknowledging that we're all on this spiritual journey, the spiritual journey of awakening to our purpose, awakening to our higher self, and that we're all kind of at different moments in the process, the journey. And so sometimes we can take a look at where we are today in our lives and point out all the things that are not right, all the things that we don't think are perfect,
Hmm.
that are going wrong for us.
Hmm.
But it's a process, though. It's a process. And so we're examining our lives as if we're supposed to be done
Hmm.
right now. And we're not done.
Hmm.
It's still evolving and it's processing and it's a journey. And so what we're doing with the puja is we're saying no judgment. here we are, each one of us, with all of our stuff that we're bringing in, all of the road yet to be traveled, but we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate right where we are because we're right exactly where we're supposed to be at
Mhm.
this moment in time. And so we're going to celebrate that, going in with a wonderful positive outlook for strong new beginnings in the morning after the puja, planting the seed of what we want to bring into our lives on the physical plane.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. The weekend, just so we're clear too, isn't just about gonging all night long, but it's
Right.
about settling into our own intention and anchoring that and in a community setting too, which then amplifies the entire experience as well. Because we're all holding space for one another and anchoring our intentions and what we want in our manifestations and allowing the sound and the breath and the meditation and the movement of our bodies for yoga to just all kind of collectively work together, would you say?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Mhm,
That's exactly it. And then when we come together in community like that, there's great power in this
mhm,
sense of the shared connection and the shared oneness.
mhm,
And then, of course, when we have these intimate kind of, it's a small group, about 20
mhm,
or so, 25. And so we have the sharing circle at the beginning and at the end and throughout, really, anytime anybody wants to share. And so there's a connection and there's a wonderful allowing yourself to be vulnerable
mhm.
in these situations where because there's such a wonderful group of people and everyone's kind of pulling for you, and
Yeah.
everyone's so, yeah,
Mhm,
so hopeful and optimistic and helpful that
mhm.
you don't mind exposing yourself and showing your vulnerability. And then we're there to support everyone and to celebrate just where you are.
Yeah, and it's also like a really fun adult slumber party.
It is. It's like the ultimate adult slumber party.
Yeah,
No
it's
adult beverages,
no,
unfortunately,
no, we
perhaps
don't
for
need them.
some.
You don't need
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
we don't need them. The only medicine is the gong, you know?
Yeah, yeah, which was a
Yeah.
lot in itself at certain points for
Yes.
me.
That's enough, probably.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
what would you say to people afterwards? Because integration is part of every modality, right?
Yes.
How do you self-care and integrate specifically too after like a puja? Because it's a lot to take on sometimes.
It is a lot. And even the hour session is a lot for
Mhm,
people. Even
mhm.
the hour session, a
That's
lot of
true.
times people think it's 15 minutes and
Mhm,
they've traveled and they've had this big experience. So we do have an aftercare sheet that we provide that has the tips and kind of the things that you could consider as ways to continue to use it. Because you're buzzing really for,
oh,
at least a couple days, 48
yeah.
hours to maybe a full week of this integration. And so there's sometimes in a group setting, particularly, we're a little more guarded.
Mhm,
And so we don't want to be the ones who, even though you're encouraged to let it out, sometimes we don't want to do that in a group setting. And so then the idea is post event is to be kind to yourself and sit quietly
mhm,
with it and see if anything does want to come out and to let go of anything that's not serving you. Big picture is we're letting go of any of the emotional junk, the emotional
mhm.
anchors, the mental anchors that keep us resonating in that state of fear and uncertainty and shame and guilt and all this stuff that is resonating at a low frequency that's really stuck down in the lower energy centers in the body.
Yeah.
And we want to try to let that go so we can resonate at our natural state,
Mhm,
which is the heart center first and the love and the joy and the peace. And once we start accepting things and resonating with that heart center first,
mhm.
life certainly becomes a lot easier. So there's certain things you can do to sit quietly. You're drinking plenty of water. You're allowing any emotions to come out that do want to come out. And then there's the creative expression, which is part of the catharsis and the integration is allowing your soul to speak through some sort of creative expression. It may be something simple as walking in the forest. That may be
Mhm.
your way of interacting with nature. Maybe painting, drawing, doodling, journaling. There's a lot of ways to let your soul speak. And it's important that, especially if we don't have one, is that a lot of times we don't have one because we don't think we're any good at something, whether it's music or art or whatever. But it's not a question of being good or bad. It's a question of allowing the
Mhm.
expression, putting the expression into form
Into
and
motion.
letting your soul speak. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so it can be a real catharsis to paint.
Mhm.
On a side note, I've always been, as I mentioned, I come from a family of musicians. And
Mhm.
so music has always been my outlet, my creative outlet. But when I heard the gongs for the first time, I had an overwhelming urge to paint. I wanted to see
Interesting.
colors and vibrant colors at that.
Mm.
So I actually went and got a big tarp for my garage floor. I got a big tarp and I put down 16 by 20 canvases with acrylic paint. And I just had this paint party that
Wow.
lasted months. I did like 100 paintings of
Awesome.
these
Wow.
complete abstract expression, no form other than whatever form it would take when the paint hit the canvas. And it was a blast.
Fun.
And it was like I had to throw it up. I had to just get it out. So,
Get it
and
out. Yeah.
I did about 100 of them.
Wow.
Most of them are complete garbage, but it's my garbage and
Yeah.
it needed to be said and expressed. And then I was done with it. I haven't
Mm.
done it since I packed everything up
Mm.
and it's stored in the garage, but I did what I felt like I needed to do. And I still have some of the paintings up that I still enjoy and are kind of meaningful to me
Yeah. That's beautiful.
on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Writing. That night on Friday I was up crying and writing. And
Mm,
then when I got home, I wrote, kept writing. Yes. That's my creative expression.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. It's a
Yeah.
real gift to
Yeah.
be able to get that out in words.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So, wow. Is there any other things or wisdom that you'd like to share before we go today?
Gosh, there's so much,
There
the
is
the
so
thing
much.
is that there is so much. I mean, for me, I stumbled upon the gongs when I started asking the big questions in life.
Mhm.
And the gong has been a tool for my own personal awakening and my own deepening spirituality. So I've been really on a continuous deep spiritual dive and have really settled into this place where I feel comfortable in understanding my existence.
Mhm.
And it all comes down to that phrase of know thyself
Mhm.
and know thyself. And so it's been an incredible journey. And right now I'm trying to put it all into a book, actually, which
Good
is
for
kind of
you.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm moving on with that, moving forward with that. So, but there is so much to it. But I think the paradox is that the more we get into it, the heavier it seems. And there's so much stuff that we're
Yeah.
trying to balance and make sense of all of it. But then it kind of spins at a certain point and you realize that the paradox is that it's very simple.
Yes.
The paradox is that it's so simple that really we have everything that we need and that we just being aware of this gift of the physical form and this physical life and the miracle that's happening
Mhm.
with every little thing holding the body together, the balance, the air pressure that keeps everything within the skin that's holding it all together,
Mhm.
the perfect balance for the body being to lie down flat and be comfortable on the bed. There's just a perfect balance to all of it. So
Mhm.
if we just it is all a miracle. I've come to believe that it is all just this incredible divine gift and experience. And so there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, but all in all, it's just a wonderful, simple process using your breath and your awareness of self and sound.
Perfectly put. Wayne, how can people get a hold of you and come to some of these sound baths or these retreats?
Sure. Well, the website is beneficialsound.org. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit.
Okay.
And so beneficialsound.org has all the information on the company. There's an events page, there's the retreats page, the privates that we do. We do the cancer wellness events
Mhm.
for patients, survivors, their loved ones, and caregivers. And so those are on the site as well. And so, yeah, it's ever evolving.
Aren't we all? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And all of our passion projects as well.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I am so honored to have you here today. And thank you for all your wisdom and your light and your sound. Thank you for,
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
of course.
And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Wayne's information will be in the end of this podcast and in the description of this episode for more information. Thank you.
Thank you.